Hello, everybody. Welcome to DC Time. I'm Dean.
I'm Chris.
Thanks for joining us again. We are going to just continue our conversation with you all. We'll just turn the camera on again. We've coming off this last couple of weeks. We was talking about an article entitled "The Saving Power of Truth." Is that the name of that?
Yeah.
Saving Power of Truth. We're going to pivot away from that a little bit, I think, today, or just continue this conversation. The takeaway for me, the big takeaway, there's so much in there, but truth, or the way our perspective, just to put this in context, truth kind of equals God, equals the Father.
All truth is divine.
Yeah. And so we might have differing beliefs. We might put our trust in at different times, in different things, in different beliefs. You might change your beliefs. But anyway, truth, we're always progressing toward the Father, toward His love.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So truth, is God, is Himself. And we're learning more and more about Him as we go. So it brings up the question, some things Chris and I was discussing this morning, is there a way, or can we be at peace with others that have different beliefs? They have a different perspective.
Yeah.
They don't believe the same things we believe. They don't believe the same things you believe.
Yeah.
Can you be at peace with them? Can you, now I'm thinking of it though in a way, in a sense, your spirits connect? To where there's a true and genuine love between two people, but your beliefs are different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you fellowship?
Do you have to have agreement?
Right. You have to have agreement. Things like that. I know this gets into some really dicey things. It's a perspective thing. Of course, we're going to assume we gravitate toward like-minded, when there's agreement, oh yeah, you're really, that can be real peaceful. That can be there can be a lot of strength in that. I've also found, looking back, I just have to look at my own self. I've been in a lot of groups throughout my life, and there was a lot of agreement within those. And now I've changed my beliefs, so what does that mean? So it's just interesting thoughts there. But of course, we're going to assume, you gravitate, you have fellowship with people at a higher level when you're really tracking with each other, or you're really like, oh man, I see that the way you see that, and you're feeding off each other. So of course we do that to where if someone is opposing you or not believing what you believe, you can only go so far with that. But I do think we can have peace with people. We can learn from all people. There's a lot of people out there who don't believe what you believe, but they still believe some wonderful things. The Spirit of God is in them. They know the Father. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about some of those things.
It's funny where you draw the lines and where we, where we differ, and then how big is that to us? The first thing I'm thinking of when we say that, when we talk about agreement and stuff, the very first thought is, have you ever found that individual you have 100% agreement with? I have not.
What about when you look in the mirror? You said it earlier.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is when you were just talking about that, can we have fellowship with somebody agreement? I started thinking, okay, my older self, could he have fellowship with myself today? I think someone's brought that up to us before. Like, would I be comfortable with my former, self, or who I was 25 years ago? Could those two people walk side by side? Which is hilarious to think about. I'm still the same person. My beliefs have been brought along, I think, by Father with realization and stuff, and I've moved along. So this self would have to be a lot more lenient with that self.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I'd have to be more, I'd have to consider where my former self stood and what he believed and what he thought,
Let me jump in and read this verse.
Yeah.
A lot of times we start with scripture. He said lenient. Philippians chapter 4, verse 5, let your lenience be known to all men. All right.
Yeah.
Just throw that out there.
And a definition of lenience is to a characteristic where you exhibit more tolerance and more mercy than expected to another. You know, there's another place in Philippians where not to think yourself superior to others. You know, it's an interesting, this article that you brought together, can two walk together except they be agreed, and that's the verse of Amos 3:3. The KJV says it that way, except they be agreed. And here, you know, that's called a mistranslation. We have more, what do you call them? Literal translations. The concordant version is shall two walk together if they fail to make an appointment. Rotherham says, can two walk together except they meet? And Young's analytical translation, do two walk together if they have not met? Okay, so you can see a little bit of a difference there instead of the KJV saying, you know, except they agree. Well, he's a Colts fan and I'm a Steelers fan, so...
And
you know, and we have agreement on a lot of things.
in a few weeks, we're going
And in a few weeks,
to oppose each other.
they oppose each other. The two teams come down against one another.
Could be a very critical game.
It could very well be. It could be a break in our relationship. But I mean, you can see some of the ridiculousness of some of this too. I'm thinking about my wife's uncle, who was a wonderful man, Southern Baptist pastor, loved him, super sweet man. He was counseling Beth and I before we got married. And he mentioned a couple that he had counseled, and they said they never argue. We totally agree. It's almost, you know, in your mind, I'm thinking they're trying to impress the pastor. We never argue. We see everything the same way. We never have disagreements. And his response was, well, one of you is unnecessary. And I thought that was hilarious. That stuck with me my whole life. Well, one of you is unnecessary. And the idea that what would be the challenge if there was 100% agreement all the time? You know, when we differ, we stretch one another. We challenge one another. We present a different perspective. I say all the time that Dean thinks about things a little differently than I do, and it's always interesting to me to hear his perspective. It gives me a different angle to look at things, you know. So that's kind of what is being presented here in this article. You know, another way to put that, we just were talking about back when we worked together, I ran studies for a study director, and that study director happened to be Hindu. And at that time, I was probably still in the camp of being a Christian, calling myself a Christian, or I was beginning to transition to believer. I began calling myself a believer, moving away from the Christian label. But two people with very different backgrounds and beliefs, you know, in that realm, spiritual realm. And yet, me and CK got along great. I really appreciated CK. And we got into a conversation where he said, he was talking about the Western culture and Eastern culture. And he said one of the problems he sees with the Western culture is that the Western culture does everything it can to avoid chaos. It does everything in its power to avoid it or get around it or make excuses for it. And when he was sharing that with me, I was trying to understand where he was coming from. And he was saying from his background that they believed chaos was inevitable. Chaos was going to come. It was a part of life, you know. And now in the interesting to look now at that older self and now myself, now I'm like, wow. Whether CK realized it or not, I don't think he did in the way that I'm looking at it now, but what a truth CK laid on me. Now I see chaos is of the Father's hands. And we know that contrast, Father's all the time working contrast, and evil and chaos and suffering and tribulation are all tools in Father's hands.
That's a sovereignty message.
It is the sovereignty message. And he's bringing us along, and it's not all candy canes. It's not all perfect transition. I mean, we have negative things that we go through, and it's purposeful and intentional. And I know that now, and it's a wonderful truth that I embrace now. And here was this Hindu sharing something that I would come to understand. I see it as Father's work, Father's plan, the Logos. So it's kind of cool that the two of us could have those moments together where we shared this stuff, and it, we could see our differences and talk about it.
And I know who he's talking about, and I know the relationship that they had together, and there was peace in that relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And there is agreement when two people might have, like I said, a lot of different beliefs within each, within themselves. But there can be that spirit, there can be peace, is what we're seeing now. It'd be interesting,
right?
Yeah, to go back and have conversations with people now that I've also had.
Oh, yeah, tremendously.
And to expand on that, and to be in a position, like you mentioned, you're not even sure where you was at in your mind and
right.
your thinking.
Right.
But to now to pick up on things, be like, well, yeah, I believe the same thing as you.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's God's sovereignty message.
Yeah.
I know that. I know the Father. I know what He's doing. And that's kind of what I'm seeing a lot that Paul presses on to do. To be lenient, to be loving. Like I said, to the point of even looking at other people as superior to yourself.
Yeah.
Because there again, just because their beliefs are different, does not mean, it doesn't put them in a different camp, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily, in their own mind they might be, but like I said, if we're chosen before we even get here, if we're chosen before the disruption,
right?
We may not know that yet.
Yeah. That I was circling the same thought. I remember you and I going and visiting with Clyde, and we watched the guy with the two chairs.
Yeah.
And it was a really neat presentation, really cool. And he expressed some belief in Trinity. And then at a later date, when we were talking about this, I sort of interjected like, yeah, but that guy believes in Trinity. So I was going to disqualify him and his message because he didn't believe in the Trinity. And Clyde very nicely, very, not rude or anything, he just said, well, when did you become a believer? And I mean, it stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, back at the disruption of the world, and it wasn't me choosing it, obviously. I was chosen in a lot, so real quickly, it put me in that mindset that, wow, we don't know who we're talking to. We don't know who's a believer and who's not a believer because we don't know when they come into that realization. Obviously they were chosen. People are chosen before the disruption of the world. So it was just a great, I've always thought of that. I mean, I love that when that occurred. It just stopped me and I started thinking, and since going forward from there, it's put me in a much more kinder, gentler way towards others who don't share exactly. I do feel like I treat others with more lenience now, and I listen to them and stuff. And when the opportunity, presents itself, or I can say, "Have you ever considered this?" or whatever, then we can have a discussion about that. And if that doesn't go well, or if that, I am really at peace with that. I'm so grateful that Father's brought me to that place where that's a peaceful thing now.
Well, as Chris talks, all I keep hearing the words ringing is freedom.
Exactly.
Walking in.
Liberating.
It's a lot of freedom there.
We've been liberated from that fear of, I've got to make you think like I do.
Yes.
That we've been liberated from
That's
that.
the world. That's our world.
It is. We want assimilation of thought. We want to walk, hand in hand, and that is not going to happen here.
Yeah, you got the finals, boundaries, and I still, it's in myself. I know there's a vanity, there's something within that wants, it almost demands that you agree with what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, it's
Yeah.
in there. Like that comes out in my own thinking. It's hard to explain. It's almost like it demands it. Like, well, you have to see it the way I see it, or there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
As if I have all truth, and we know we don't. We don't have all truth. There again, when you look at truth as being God, as being the Father, then you start seeing, oh, we can be in agreement
Yeah.
with God's creation. He loves them. He has them exactly where they are for a reason. It may be to teach us.
Exactly.
Maybe to teach us something.
When we were first talking about this up in the kitchen, you had said something, and I instantly thought of the explorer. You know, Byrd is one of them.
Yeah.
Colonel Byrd or something like that. He was trying to find the North Pole, and he plants his flag where he believes the North Pole is. And we have external pressures like that where people on the outside may be looking in and they'll say, oh, he's in the camp of, you planted my flag, he's in the camp of this person.
Yeah.
Camp, whatever you want to call it. And it's interesting because they hear me say something, so boom, he's lockstep with everything this person says. That's not true. In fact, I'm thinking of that journey that I've been on and where I'm at, and I feel like behind me is flags everywhere. Somebody, Bill and Annabelle Gillum, at the very beginning of this journey, started telling me about truth. We are grace. We live in a time where grace is being poured out. And that was the very first time I'd heard something like this, where reconciliation had occurred at the cross, and God had peace with us. And so, boom, somebody could say, well, you're one of them Bill and Annabelle Gill. You're in their camp.
Yeah.
Well, I was, I guess you could say, for a while, and then I moved into Bob George and classic Christianity, and then I moved into Jeff Harkin and Grace Plus Nothing, and then I moved in. It was just one person after another that you read. You got a little piece, a little bit more, and a little bit more. Martin helped me tremendously with those things I thought excluded me from the body of Christ. Seeing that those things I struggle with were put there for a purpose. That's a great truth I'll always appreciate and love that Martin gave me. Alan Hess giving me a piece about death and the truth of death, and how great is our message to those people who don't think that, they are still fearful for their loved ones about eternal torment. I've got flags planted everywhere where people have shared truth with me, and that's what we believe about truth. It's progressive. We're moving along, That's what I get from this article. That, I don't know that I'll ever be lockstep with him. I don't think I will. I don't think that's what this journey's about. I think it's about contrast, and so therefore we're not going to be in agreement with one another. Can we have peace during that? Heck yeah, you can.
Can't ever come over to the cult side. You never.
Ooh, that would be tough, putting on the blue and white of the coat. I look so good in black and yellow.
All right. Well, I think our that's all for this week.
I think we can wrap it up there.
We'll wrap it up. As always, we love you out there. Appreciate your time. We'll see you next week.
Take care.